right, welcome everyone to our very first AMA. I'm very excited to be launching this AMA series, and we have collaborated with Off-Chain, which I'm going to tell you a little bit about in a moment, and Women in Digital Economy, which are two other community groups. And we're kind of all coming together to basically help get more reach and help more people learn about the whole crypto and blockchain and Web3 ecosystem. And it's going to be a whole series that we're going to do every second Monday. All right, so you can keep tuning in, and I've got a little bit more information about that in just a moment. So let's jump into it. So tonight we're going to be speaking with Jo, who is from Labrys. We're going to hear all about her stories. As we're going through today, please put your questions in the chat. I've got some questions. I'm going to get started with her, and then I'm going to hand it over to you. So this is Ask Her Anything, any questions that you may have for her, and we'll go through those when we get kind of to the end of the AMA. So who am I? For those of you that haven't met me before, my name is Danielle Marie. I wear many different hats, okay, in the Web3 ecosystem. So I'm a Web3 educator and community leader. So my main thing is I am the head blockchain trainer for TAFE Queensland, and I also contract myself out to other RTOs such as Solterra Web3. So I have lots of students studying the diploma and the advanced diploma of applied blockchain with me. So anybody that's interested in studying blockchain, please reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'd be more than happy to help you. My passion project that I have just launched this year, which is Women in Digital Economy, I'll tell you a little bit more about that in just a moment. Founder of All Things Blockchain, which I'm also going to tell you a little bit more about in case you're new to that community. I recently just taken the co-founder role of Off-Chain Brisbane. So there's different chapters. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that in just a moment as well. And I'm also on the blockchain committee for the ACS, which is the Australian Computer Society. So I'm not going to talk too much more about myself, but I just want to give you a snap overview of all the different things that I do in the industry. So if anybody's interested in any one of those things, please reach out to me. So I just want to quickly tell you what All Things Blockchain is. If you haven't heard, or if you're new to the community, we are a non-profit association. I founded it back in November 2020. Okay, so just at the kind of the start of the bull run, and I basically wanted to, my vision, and it's still my vision, of creating a meetup organized and run by the community. So although I'm the main driver of it, it couldn't happen without the volunteers and the sponsors that we have. So I'd like to take a quick moment to acknowledge all of the sponsors. If any of you have been to our in real life events, which we actually have one coming up on Wednesday, you may have had a chance to meet some of these lovely people. And I couldn't do everything that I do with All Things Blockchain without each and every single one of these people. Anybody that's interested, if you are local, if you're in Brisbane and you want to tap in and become a volunteer in the in real live events, please reach out to me. But we're also focusing on growing ATB more nationally, going to be doing a lot more online events. So we need help with things with like social media and like emails and just basically growing the community. So anybody that's interested in volunteering, please also reach out to me, because we're always looking for community builders to help us grow and build this lovely community. Once again, it couldn't happen without sponsors. So these sponsors are the ones that help us cover the operational costs, because even though we're a nonprofit, we still have operational costs. And all of our meetups, if anybody has been to them, we provide you with free food and drinks, and that all comes from the sponsors. So I'm not going to go through each and single one of them. You can actually go onto our website or go onto our meetup group, and there's more information on each of our sponsors and what they do for the community. But very grateful for all of them, because these events would not happen without them. Collaboration partners. Okay, so these people are communities, and I'm going to go through a little bit of Off-Chain and Women in Digital just in a moment. But the one I'm really excited about is these AMAs are actually going to be hosted in the future in RFox, which is a metaverse. If anybody has heard of metaverses in gaming, it's obviously a growing industry. We're just waiting for their WebGL version to be ready. Anybody that has VR goggles, they'll be able to attend the meetings wearing those and be in the virtual reality. So I'm very excited for that. We're hoping that that will kick off in March, if not the latest in April. So very exciting. These AMAs are going to be inside a real live metaverse. So stay tuned for that, but we'll be collaborating with them. And Women in Blockchain Blockchain Australia. I used to be one of the key organizers for that organization as well, and I still work with them quite closely, but I have launched Women in Digital Economy, which I'll just briefly talk about at the moment. Women in Digital Economy is basically a community, an organization that is focusing on bringing more women into the space and helping mentor and upskill them. Now, it's not just for women, but our primary focus is for women, but we also have a male ally program. So if there's any men on this call that would like to do any mentorship, I have lots of men that are in this industry that are I would consider my mentors. So we definitely still work with men, and we invite men to come to all of our events, but our primary focus is to help women upskill and transfer into the industry, because anybody that's been in the industry for a while, it doesn't matter, not just Web3, but just tech in general, is generally a male-dominated industry. So we're just trying to have an impact on how we can help more women get involved in the space. If you want some more information on that, please go and check out the website. We do have some events that are coming up. They are based in Brisbane. Our first series of events are all going to be in real life, okay? Eventually, we will be going online, but these are going to be more educational workshops. So really kind of hands-on kind of learning about different topics. So if you want to see more about our events, you can go to our website, just click events, and you can see them. This one is coming up on February 21st. Off-chain, so I mentioned off-chain. Some of you, if you haven't heard of it, it is also a nonprofit organization, but they're global, so they're all over the world. And what I love about this is that there's one in Melbourne, there's one in Sydney, here in Australia, and then they're all over the world. So if you're going traveling and you want to go and see if you can connect or go to a meetup or find out what's going on, you can join the off-chain community and you can grow your community globally. You can go and kind of attend events. So anybody that's on this call that's not in Brisbane, I know that there is people organizing events in both Sydney and Melbourne if you're in Australia. And if you're going traveling, highly recommend that you go and check out Off-Chain. I think it's pretty cool. And they're also a nonprofit. So we've collaborated with them to just try to basically bring the wider community together. So I'm just going to quickly go over some events that are coming up, and then we're going to jump into the AMA. So the next AMA, which is in 2 weeks from now, I just announced it, okay? It's with Sean Anderson. Now, he is an AI consultant, and he specializes in prompt engineering. Just in the chat, can anybody, I just want to know how many people here use, say, ChatGPT on a regular basis? Just put a yes in the chat there for me, just so I can kind of get a little bit of a gauge. I've got one yes so far. A few more yeses coming in. I use it every single day. And to be honest, my productivity is, grown a lot. Like I never be able to used to do all my socials and all that sort of stuff. So it helps me with a lot of things. But it comes down to your prompting to be able to get the most efficiency out of it. And he is going to basically answer any questions that we have on using AI, not just ChatGPT. I know there's somebody else that is using another one in there. So if you want to attend that, that will be in 2 weeks, same time, same place. Well, it's a different Zoom link, but you can jump onto that and you can ask any questions that you have regarding AI prompting or just anything kind of with productivity and AI. Our next ATB event, we do have one on Wednesday, okay, but it is booked out. I actually forgot to put, we are going to live stream it as well, and I don't think I've actually put the link on here, but if you go to Meetup, we have, because we've sold out, we've got 120 RSVPs and we've got 15 people on the wait list at the moment. We're also going to be live streaming all of our events, so you can tune into that. But our event that's happening next month is for International Women's Day on March 6th, okay? The ATB events are always on the first Wednesday of every month, located here in Brisbane. This will also be live streamed, so if you are not in Brisbane, that's okay. All of our events are going to be a live stream. That's very exciting for us. That's one of our focuses for ATB this year, is to kind of grow more nationally and have more online engagement. And these are all women founders that are building Web3 businesses. So I'm very excited to learn from all of these women and what they're doing in the Web3 space. If you haven't heard of Blockchain Australia, I highly recommend that you check them out. Okay, they're the industry association body for all of Australia. But the cool thing is they now have an events page. Okay, so you can go to Blockchain Australia and you can go to the events page, and it doesn't matter what city that you're in. If you're in Brisbane, Melbourne, WA, Adelaide, Sunshine Coast, all of the events you can generally find in there, as you can kind of see here. Like, for example, oh, well, this is on, like, I think on January 30th, there was a Solana meetup. There's the Oz DeFi. So really, really good source to go and see if you have a meetup in your local area, especially if you're not from Brisbane and you can't tap into the ATB event. So I highly recommend that you check that out. We have a big convention coming up. Okay, so the AI and Web3 convention. A lot more news is going to be coming out about that. I am definitely helping in many different facets. I'm organizing some educational workshops. I will also be speaking there. ATB will be heavily involved. So if you're based in Brisbane or the Gold Coast or surrounding areas, definitely an event I recommend that you check out and get involved in. We do have a discount code, okay, for anybody that is wanting to attend at the moment, that gives you 45% discount, and then starting March 1st, they start to kind of reduce their discounts. So please go ahead and scan that if you want. We also will be putting it onto our link tree, which I've got a link at the bottom for as well. Or sorry, bottom. This is our links to our link tree. I don't actually have the discount code up on the link tree at the moment, but it was something that I thought about that I should do afterwards. So anybody that wants to stay up to date with our socials, we have a monthly newsletter that we have just launched. Any discounts that we have, our sponsors are actually all in the process of sending us discounts and offers. We'll put that onto the link tree. So feel free. I think also if you go to our Twitter, the link tree is on there as well. So that is enough for me, all of the updates on the events and everything that is coming up. Now, let's get into the nitty gritty and let's talk to Jo. So first of all, welcome, Jo. Thank you so much for your time today. So everyone just say hello, give a hello in the chat to Jo. Jo is, I'm really excited to have this AMA because I remember, I don't even know how many years ago was that at Crypto Coffee, Jo, that we met.
I think like 2.5, 3 years ago.
I think and it was right at the start of your journey. I can't remember. I can't remember exactly if you reached out to me on LinkedIn or something, or we met was it at the Crypto Coffee that we met, or did you reach out to me on LinkedIn first? I can't remember.
I think I had met you at just like a regular tech meetup. And then I had an interview at a couple different
Yeah.
blockchain
Yeah,
companies.
yes, I
And so I
remember.
went to the crypto coffee because I was like, I'm going to these blockchain interviews. I don't even know what MetaMask is. And then your meetup was all about how to install MetaMask.
Yes, and I remember, and I was like, oh, she kind of sounds like me. So I didn't actually mention that. If anybody hears that I have an accent, I'm originally from Canada. And Jo, you're from where in America?
Los Angeles.
Los Angeles. So yeah, so we sound similar. So I remember that. And I remember her telling me that she was about to embark on this journey and she had some interviews with some blockchain firms, and I knew the blockchain firms, and I was like, okay. And I just remember that. And then fast forward, wow, how much has happened. And I'm so excited to kind of jump into it and share a little bit of your story with the community. So before we get into how you got into, blockchain and why you got into blockchain and all the other questions that I have, what was your initial thing that sparked you in just the crypto and blockchain industry first off? Because you had to be interested in crypto or blockchain before you decided to become a developer.
I actually think that I wasn't originally interested in blockchain. I kind of learned about it on the job. And yeah, the more that I spoke to other people and came to the ATB meetups about like why they believed in blockchain and what it does and the actual use cases for it, the more I also started to believe in it. And so, yeah, so at the beginning, I was like everyone else. I was like, aren't NFTs just JPEGs? And what's a crypto coin? And why would I want one? But yeah, now going to these meetups, having educated myself, I see more of the value in it.
Well, I am first to put my hand up that I got into the industry because I wanted to be crypto rich, right? I was like, I got in at the end of 2017, and but I'm actually pretty proud. My first transaction was peer to peer because I didn't know what I was doing, and this person's like, "You should buy Bitcoin." So I sent him $1,000, and he actually sent me a ledger. Well, not sent me the actual ledger. I got a ledger, and then he transferred that money. So I was very lucky to start my journey that way. But I thought I was going to get crypto rich, and I threw $5,000 in it, what was a lot of money to me. Still a lot of money to me, but at that time, I was like all in, and it went shooting up, and I was like, woohoo, it turned into 25 grand in like a month. And I was like, this is amazing. And then like a month later, it was like back down to 5 grand. And I had no idea what a bear and bull market was. And that's when I went down the rabbit hole and I started to learn about the technology, very similar to you, but this was back in 2018. And that was one of the reasons why I started All Things Blockchain, is because it would be me and some developers, mainly guys. And I was like, okay, how can I change the dynamics in the culture within Brisbane? But that is how I got in. So it sounds like I always say that crypto is the gateway drug to learning blockchain. So my next question, so I've just lost my questions because I have questions here for you. Okay, so then after you're going to the meetups and you're learning about, blockchain, and it's more than JPEGs, what kind of motivated you to shift your career? Because I know that you were an English teacher. So
Mhm.
what kind of made you think, you know what, I don't want to teach English anymore, and I want to go and learn how to code and learn in the blockchain space?
Yeah, so originally I was a teacher online, and so my original journey just into developing in general, not necessarily blockchain, was that I wanted to recreate the platform that I had been teaching on, but I didn't know anything at the time. So I was just teaching myself HTML and CSS. Um, and then, yeah, I just continued on that journey. And the reason that I actually didn't even end up building that, I just kept learning to code. And I started going to these meetups, and I realized that there were really almost no women. And if they were women, they weren't tech focused. They were more like the HR people or somebody's wife or something like that. And I was like, do you know what? Be the change you want to see in the world. I am going to be a developer because I don't see enough women developers. So
That's
that's
all.
what
I love
basically
that.
got me
That's
started.
amazing. So inspiring. I wish I look at coding, and I've worked for some developers, and it hurts my brain. So I'm glad that there's women like you that that you can go in, and it can be very, very challenging. Not that I want this whole conversation or narrative to be about, women and being in the space. But one of the reasons why I created All Things Blockchain, and my original business, She's Blockchain Savvy, which I still have in the beginner courses, is because very much like that, I'd go to these meetups and it'd be me and 40 guys. And I remember this one meetup, I took my friend along, and it was supposed to be a Bitcoin Cash. I don't know if anyone remembers Bitcoin Cash. Meetup back in 2018. And we walked in, and I didn't even really notice. I just got so comfortable being in a room full of men, and she instantly felt uncomfortable because it was like literally the two of us. And then everything that they were talking about was so over our heads. And I actually went up to the guy that hosted it. I was like, you call it a Bitcoin Cash for beginners, and what you guys were talking about was like intermediate to advanced. And I was like, no wonder why you're struggling to get people to come to these meetups, let alone women. And then that's when I knew that I could. That's how I like how you're like, you know what, I'm going to become a developer. That's when I was like, okay, you know what, I'm going to try to fix it from organizing community and just trying to kind of make people feel really, really invited. And it has been a challenge with ATB, because sometimes how do we service the regular community that want to dive deep and learn more about the technical and more deeper? And then you've got somebody that's brand new to the meetup, and they're like, oh my God, I don't understand anything that they're saying. So it can be a little bit of a balance. So I commend you for doing that. And that leads me to my next question. What was kind of some of the biggest challenges that you faced in that very beginning when you were trying to transition from going, self-taught English teacher into a blockchain world that was predominantly, male dominated?
I think the biggest challenge was that because there are a lot of startups in the crypto space, they mostly focus on getting developers who are full stack. And so I had started off being only a front end developer. And I quickly had to figure out, how do I do backend? How do I do blockchain so that I could make myself more useful to these companies? Because if I was just sitting on front end, I wouldn't really be able to engage as much with these companies, and I probably wouldn't have gotten as far as I did today. So that was probably the biggest challenge for me. I actually, the order that I went in was, I started with front end, and then I went into the blockchain, and then back end really scared me until about 6 months ago. Actually, I finally was like, all right, bite the bullet, do back end.
Okay, well, I'm actually going to go into that in my next question for you. You kind of, we didn't even plan this, and I love it's just naturally leading that way. But just for the people that are on the call that have no idea what full stack means, what does full stack mean in terms of developer world?
So, as a developer, you're basically making a website. So, there's front end, which is how the website looks and how the user interacts with the website. And then there's back end, which is sending data to a server. So, for example, when you log in and you put in your email and password, that data of your email and password gets sent to the server to verify that you are indeed somebody who signed up before, and then gets sent back to the front end or the web page to display that, yay, you've logged in. So that's back end and front end. So full stack is knowing both of those, being able to both display the page, but also being able to send the information.
Okay, cool. And that kind of leads me into the next question. So for beginners that are either on this call or watching the recording, what kind of programming languages do you recommend starting with, and why start with those? Because I know that there is a lot of languages out there. You know, there's React, there's C, C++, there's Rust, there's Solidity, like, you know, I'm sure the list goes on. So for somebody starting off, what's your recommendations?
I know that if people want to get into AI, people always recommend Python. I've taken a look at Python, and I personally can't recommend it. It's just a bit finicky in terms of, it always requires a certain amount of white space. So I wouldn't go with Python. I wouldn't go with any of the C's, C sharp, C++, because those are a bit older, I think, and are starting to be phased out. So where I would go is JavaScript, and specifically TypeScript, if possible. So JavaScript, I think, is almost human readable. So you can read a function, but you can almost say it in English words, and then you understand what it does. So that's why I like JavaScript a lot. And then for a professional context, using TypeScript just makes everything a lot cleaner, and it kind of checks you so that you're not putting in like information where it doesn't belong. So you're not putting a number where you need to have letters or anything.
Ah, very cool. And so both of those, because those languages are Web 2 based, right? Like they're not native to Web 3. So those are kind of some good skills. But are there any particular languages that are Web 3 specific that you would recommend starting off with?
Yeah, so if you are doing JavaScript and TypeScript, as I had recommended, then Solidity is almost the exact same. The only difference is that you have to specify the size of your numbers, how many bits it is, rather than just saying it's a number. So it's very easy to translate, and there's a bunch of frameworks that you can use for that as well, such as Hardhat, which is entirely in JavaScript, which allows you to test your contract before you actually deploy it on the chain. So there's a lot of support for, I think, JavaScript and TypeScript libraries in Web3.
Beautiful. And I know that one of the things that, you know, we don't I don't teach, you know, about programming languages, but what we do teach in, you know, the courses that I teach is about how you're applying blockchain to business, and then they have to go and potentially scope out what blockchain they're going to build on, right? Whether it be Solana or Ethereum or Cardano or any of those things. And I always say, you know, in the real world, if you're out going to go kind of do a technical feasibility or an organizational feasibility, you know, you'd have to make sure that you could find developers that code in that language. So I guess my question is to you, like, say, for example, at Labrys, do you guys have people that like specialize in, for example, you know, whatever language Solana is written in, or Cardano, or like, or all of it, like, or does it take a lot to learn? So like if somebody came to you and said, you know, you can write in Solidity, but they want you to build something on Solana, like how long would it take you to learn that language? Like, can you kind of give us some kind of context of the different blockchains and the different languages and how complex it is?
Yeah, so most of the blockchains are what's called EVM compatible, and that just basically means that you can type it in Solidity. So your smart contracts are in Solidity, which is the one that's similar to TypeScript. The only exception that I am aware of is Solana, which is coded in Rust. I personally don't code in Rust, so I can't do any Solana smart contracts. I can still integrate into a front end because we just use React on the front end. Um, but yeah, Solana would require Rust, and I think Rust is a bit of a lower level language, a bit more difficult to wrap your head around. So I personally don't do it. I leave that for the seniors. So I think just sticks to Solidity because that will give you 90% of the blockchains.
Good foundation, good place to start. Okay, great. And then I got a couple more questions for her for myself. And then please, if you have questions, if they're popping up, put them in the chat and I'll go through them. So what kind of resources or learning pathways kind of helped you get started? And what would you recommend now to people that are looking to learn how to become a blockchain developer?
Yeah, so the first thing I would recommend is obviously learning the JavaScript, TypeScript, React framework. Most of the clients that we have do want like more of a React app, and it's quite easy to use.
Stop you right there. What is a React app?
So React is just a framework for JavaScript. So it's just JavaScript, but it's a library that you use to make it so that you can call things easier and update the state of things. So like if you type in something in a form, the page remembers what you're typing, basically. So yeah, so all of those TypeScript, JavaScript, React, and that can help you just get started with integrating like a front end for the blockchain. And then if you wanted to go further and actually develop the smart contract side of things, it would be easy as well to integrate those into your front end if you've already had experience integrating other people's smart contracts. So that's how I would probably start. Is I would probably do the same pathway that I did, which is learning front end and then blockchain, and then if you get to it, back end as well. But a lot of the things that you do on chain might not require a backend because the backend is just storing the data, which is what the blockchain does. So you might not need a backend.
Okay, and what are some resources then? That's a great learning pathway, going and starting with that. But what are some resources? Some people are on the call, like where should they get started if they want to just teach themselves like how you did, you know?
Yeah, I would start probably with the hard hat documentation because they're the ones who can help you get started setting up um, the smart contracts and unit testing for them as well. That's for if you want to go with the Web3 side. If you want to do just
Sorry, what's Hard Hat? Is that a platform or is it a
it's just a
school?
website that you can generate your code based like an outline of the code for your smart contract and unit testing.
But how
Um,
do you learn how to code the smart contract on
so
hard?
they have just you just read the documentation. That's kind of what developers do is they just read a bunch of documentation. So I'll just send it in the chat real quick so everyone can take a look. But yeah, just go through their whole getting started of installing it and then setting up a project, compiling, testing. Just go through with their basics that they already have set up, and that'll help you get started in Solidity specifically, as well as with JavaScript unit testing. And then if you just want to learn React or the front end, honestly, I just watch YouTube videos. So there's a couple of channels that I follow. One is dApp University on YouTube, um, and another one is Morales Academy. And they are specifically about if you have a smart contract already or somebody else's smart contract, it's about how to take that smart contract and make it into a front end. There's also Build Space, which also gears towards Web3 and also AI. And it also, if you were interested in Solana, they do have a lot of Solana content as well. And they walk you through both ends of it. So building the web page and also the smart contract that has the coins and everything in it. So those were the three that I pretty much used to learn for myself. I would say also another thing though is also finding mentors in the space. So I was really lucky that I had a lot of really kind mentors from my first job specifically, one of whom actually ended up becoming my partner. So it's kind of a blockchain love story because he's a senior blockchain developer. And so whenever I have a question, also honestly just ask him. So.
That is cute. I love that. I think mentors are so important, or people to guide, and that's I have one of the main reasons why I've started Women in Digital Economy is that, I've got a large network and a lot of people that I know where I can connect. So I want to help specifically not just women, but more geared towards women and helping them kind of transition and mentoring them and placing them and being like, okay, let's look at your existing skill sets. Okay, you want to learn about developing? Okay, great. Like even if we get you an internship or an starter off type of role, or send them some resources. So I think that it's really cool that you had some mentors to help you in the beginning. So before we hand it over to everybody that's on the call and see what kind of questions they have for you, how do you stay up to date? It's growing so fast. There's things, I know that Ethereum, for example, they have some upgrades coming. I know that you don't code in Solana, but I'm going to use this as an example because I know Solana extensions just came out, like all these different features. Like, how do you kind of stay up to date with how fast the ecosystem is growing, specifically more around blockchain development?
I think a lot of people just look through the artist formerly known as Twitter, X. So yeah, just follow different blockchain companies on X. I think Blockchain Australia is a big one. ATB is a big one. I think Labrys is trying to become a big one. They were a bit quiet for a while, but they've started posting more. We have now a person in the office. His name is Emilio, and he's the one in the office who's always on top of the latest trend. And so he's always posting now on all of our socials. And he also gives a talk to us every Monday morning about this is this week's trend in blockchain and what might be useful for us type of thing. So yeah, I would honestly even follow Emilio directly if I knew what his Twitter was.
I was just
But
gonna say, do you know what his Twitter is? I'm just looking at the Labrys Twitter now, and I'll share it in the chat. But ATB is the same. We're probably a bit quiet, like Labrys, for a while because we are, we're based off of volunteers, so we didn't, have a lot of bandwidth for doing socials, but we now have Rachel who's doing socials, and that's why I also put it out there if there's anybody that wants to volunteer and help, because just sharing things, like, oh, Solana extensions are out. I don't know if anybody is following Farcaster, but Farcaster frames just came out, and I'm not going to babble on too much about those, but sorry, I'm trying to share. Oh. Okay, so Farcaster Frames, if anybody hasn't heard about it, go and research it. I think I've got a post coming out in a day or two about it, but it's basically this new feature. It's kind of like Farcaster, if people don't know about it, it's kind of like the decentralized version of Twitter, but now this Frames, this feature that's come out where you can basically have like e-commerce inside of your post, so they don't actually have to leave your feed to purchase. They can actually purchase inside of that frame inside of the social media. So anyways, there's always new things coming out in the space, so it can be really hard to stay on top of things. All right, I think I've got one or two more questions and then we're going to hand it over. What advice are you going to give to somebody that has zero technical background? So you're speaking to me, 3 years ago when I got into blockchain, I had zero background in the technical space. Now I am more the soft skills side of things. Okay. I maybe one day I'll venture over to your side of the woods. But at the moment I did a entry-level programming course in my bachelor's of information systems, and I hated every moment of it. So I don't see it happening anytime soon. But what advice would you give somebody with no technical that is thinking about breaking into the space? You've given them some learning pathways and you've given them some resources, but what's the advice that you'd give them?
First, I want to say that I think the soft skills are very important. There's another woman who works at Labrys. Her name is Erin, and she's a project manager. So she's not in the tech side of things, but I always tell her, I was like, I can't do what you do, to try to explain this to a client in a way that they understand. I just would never be able to. I'd get so frustrated so quickly, I would just start yelling at them. So the soft skills are very important too. So if that's where your talent is, then absolutely go for that. If you do want to break into more of the tech side of things, then yeah, I think that for the tech side specifically, it's really important to build up your GitHub profile. And I'll share mine. I have a
And just
ton
tell
of,
people what GitHub are, right? There might be some people on this call that don't know what GitHub is.
yeah, so GitHub is basically just a way to put all of your code projects in one place so people can see it. And that's what employers really look at when they're hiring developers. So this is my GitHub. I have a lot of projects on there. Most of them are open source, so feel free to grab them and play with them yourself. Um,
Is
but
it
yeah,
kind of like a LinkedIn for developers, you
a
know?
little bit it is. Yeah, like you
Like
can't
your
really see.
resume, right?
Yeah, so it's all of the projects that you've like all the projects I've ever built. Like if you go far back enough in my history, you'll see me like learning how to use like CSS, like some really, really basic stuff. But yeah, my more recent stuff is obviously more blockchain focused. So for the tech side of things, I'd recommend GitHub. For either side, soft skills or tech side, I think the biggest piece of advice I could give anyone is just have audacity. So go in, you might not feel like you are talented enough or you don't know enough yet, or you still have to learn a couple things. But in blockchain, everybody's in the same boat. Everybody's always learning. So you'll never really get there if you keep stopping yourself by saying, oh, I don't know enough yet. So just have the audacity to say, do you know what? I'm just going to try and see how it goes. Because I actually got my first job in blockchain only knowing HTML and CSS. So those were the only two coding languages that I knew, and I had to learn on the job um, all the different frameworks that I've talked about here. And so, yeah, I just came into the interview and I was like, look at how great this web page is that I made. Isn't it fantastic? You need me. You need me. And they ended up hiring me. And I told them a couple of months later, I was like, I don't know why you hired me. And they were like, you were just so enthusiastic. We knew that you were going to do great because you just really wanted to do it. So, yeah, just have that audacity, have that passion. You're never going to know enough. So just go for it.
All right, I love that. You always, what do they call it here? Is it tall poppy syndrome? Is that where you don't feel, or is that the other way around? You know, you're never going to feel good enough. And I feel that way in the Web3 space all the time because it's so big and it's so vast. And I even say to my students all the time, this is a peer-to-peer learning experience. I learn from my students all the time because I can't know about all of the projects, you know, and it's just too big. So I think it's fantastic. Last question that I have before I hand it over to the audience is looking back, what is something that you may have done differently in your transition from going from an English teacher to a blockchain developer, if anything? Is there anything that you would have done differently?
Um, I wasn't expecting that one. Give me a moment to think.
It's okay if you say no, if you're like, no, I'm happy with everything that I did.
Um, I think I am pretty happy with everything that I did because I like went into it knowing like what I wanted to get out of it, which was supporting other women in the space. So I talked about finding mentors. I also, even though wasn't on, I was a junior and really didn't know anything, I also ended up finding a mentee somehow within my first couple of weeks of being a junior because she was quality tester and she wanted to be a developer, but she, like I said before, didn't think that she had enough skills, even though she was going to uni for IT and coding. And so I was the one who was kind of encouraging her, no, 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 you can do it. You can do it. I know you can. Just go for it. Um, so yeah, I got mentors in this space really quickly. I supported other people in the space really quickly. I learned as fast as I could. And yeah, I'm also, I want to say, a little bit privileged in that I just have one of those brains that just soaked up the code and I learned it really quickly. Some people do take time, like the one that I ended up picking up as a mentee. She's definitely a slower learner, but she is just as determined and she is getting there. Um, and yeah, I think it took her maybe only a couple months longer than me, but she's a mid now as well, I think.
Oh, perfect. I think that's great, you know, advice. And I say the same thing to people, and that's why I say to my students all the time, my biggest piece of advice is just turn up, start meeting people. My whole career started by going to meetups, and I think it was the same as you, Jo. Um, is that my first job was with a Web3 development company, and I didn't know much, and I did some quality testing, but it was just my drive and my passion. And Web3 Academy, I listen to their podcast all the time, big advocate for them. And they were promoting these three jobs. And they said, even if you don't have experience, because it was like a sales job and like a crypto Twitter, I still can't bring myself to say an X role. I don't know. And they said, we don't care if you don't have experience as long as you have drive or passion and you want to excel in this industry. And that is one of the things that I noticed that's very different in the Web3 industry, in the startup community, compared to the traditional Web2. They want you to already have all the skills. In the Web3 space, they'll give you a crack. I say to my students, start with an unpaid internship. I started with, you know what I mean? Or you start a lower entry job. Like, you know, I'm sure you weren't full-time, you know, as soon as you got started, or maybe you were lucky, but a lot of the times it's like a part-time role to start, and you might be juggling, you know, like I was still working in hospitality when I started, and I was working part-time at the dev agency. But the amount that I learned in 6 months in a, you know, an entry-level junior position is more than I've learned in my bachelor's in the last 2 years. It's actually quite funny. I don't call the teacher out because it's not the teacher's material, but the material is so bad, right? Like, but the students don't know that what they're learning is not correct. And I'm not even going to go. They wanted you to create a retro storyboard. I'm like, what's a retro storyboard? I'm like, a storyboard and a retro are two totally different things, you know? And I was able to, and they wanted you to do the retro storyboard before you had done your group work. I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense because you do a retro when you're finished, you know, like things like that. So getting an entry-level job would be my advice to anyone. So that's enough about me babbling on. I'd like to open it up. Is there any questions? Let me find the chat. I don't know. I've lost the chat, so let me see if I can find it. Anybody have any questions, or did I ask all the questions and you feel that you got all the learnings? You can unmute yourself. You can put it in the chat. Does anybody have a question for Jo about anything? Or do we've got some shy people?
Developers do tend to be shy. Feel free to type it out.
All right, Jordan, go ahead.
Hi, Jer. Danielle, I've got questions. Like for myself, I kind of so I kind of enrolled in a course in Morales. Like, I think just a while ago, trying to kind of learn this thingy because at the time I was thinking to do a career change, and I thought maybe coding is something that I could do. So I enrolled in Morales Academy and I started to learn about Java. Okay, long story short, I gave up by line 12. Okay, so like my trade, I'm a chef by trade. So I'm always on my creative side, meaning, I'm a right brainer. The lines, the code just doesn't make logical sense to me. My question to you is, Jo, according to your, observation or experience, is there any way to jumpstart, like to switch from the right brain to the left brain? How do I get myself to be more logical? Because when I have to deal with brackets or dots, I seem to get lost in that language. But I'm very, very passionate about coding because I know what it can do, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if it's something for me.
So I think that one of the greatest pieces of advice I ever got is when you're first trying to figure out what to do in the code, don't write code. Just write it in English, step by step, what you're going to do. And then you can put in the code afterwards, line by line. So for example, if you want to make a code that you put in a number and it puts out the words of that number, you need to think through, okay, so first I need to figure out how am I getting those numbers? So then you put a line that just says get numbers. And then in the next line, okay, now I need to figure out a way to put those numbers as words. So I probably need some sort of storage of the numbers versus words. So create storage of the numbers and words. So you just keep going and trying to break it down into just in English. So don't even worry about the code yet. But honestly, it's very, very difficult. I had a performance review at work recently, and one of the things that they told me is that I still need to work on breaking down problems all the way. So it really is a skill, and it does take time. But yeah, just start off writing English first, and then write the code. And I think that really helps.
Oh, you're muted, Jordan. Yeah.
Yes. So, our curiosity, I've always wondered, blockchain as a service. Yes, yes. Does that require a code to develop that? If I were to start something like I want to have my own business that is, offering blockchain as a service, do I need to know the code in order to have that business, or how does that work?
Well, it depends on really what you want to do. So can you describe what you mean more by blockchain as a service? It's
So
a bit
for
of a broad term.
example, I want to create a platform that people can just come in without having the knowledge of Web3 or without having to
Right.
know computer codings. They can integrate their current business, which is from Web2 to Web3.
Right. I would say that you maybe don't need to know how to code necessarily to do that. You can just use there's already different services that kind of do the integration for you, and you can just be kind of the person that recommends how to implement those different services. If it's something like they want to do just like a simple, like I had a project recently that they really just wanted to do a very simple ERC20 crypto coin in their platform. But there was no actual real functionality to it. So I didn't actually have to write the smart contract for it. I actually used this thing called Open Zeppelin Wizard, which if you want to do smart contracts but don't really want to learn the code, I think is a really great tool because you just kind of check boxes. And let it know what you want it to do. So you're like, I want my NFT to be called this, and I want it to be every NFT is unique, or I want it to be an ERC 1155 where there's different token IDs associated with different ones, or I want it to be an ERC 20 coin instead. So yeah, you can just use that tool kind of to spin up like the basics of a contract if somebody just wants an NFT for like login or something like that.
Because I was, just thinking in a scenario that if I want to do like a startup, if I've got an idea, but then I am limited, I have limited resources. For example, I might not be able to afford a developer or a coder, a programmer, but I do have the idea. Is there any way for someone like me with absolutely no coding experience or background to dabble into something, of sorts? To, just like how you would just create a landing page for a website with very minimum technical skill.
Yeah, so honestly, ChatGPT is something that I would use.
All right.
It's something that I do use whenever there's particularly in blockchain, there's a lot of math that happens. I am the worst at math. I cannot figure out when I'm supposed to divide, when I'm supposed to multiply. I have no idea. I always just ask ChatGPT. I'm like, I have 1 Bitcoin and 20 tokens. I don't know how to convert it. Write me a function, please. And it does it.
What did you do before ChatGPT though? Because it's been around like.
I asked my partner because he is an engineer, so he has the math brain in this household. Yeah,
That's awesome. I love that.
Awesome, great. I mean, we put technology to great use. I like that.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And Jordan, just to piggyback off of that, I think that I remember when I very first years ago, before I transitioned into the crypto space, I had an online network marketing business. And before that, I didn't know anything about building websites or anything. And back then it was like, you know, if you wanted a website, you had to pay somebody to do it in WordPress, and it was an absolute nightmare. And I didn't know how to scope out a project, and I used to get so frustrated. Now I just use Wix for everything. I could have a landing page website up in like, and the other day when I created Women in Digital Economy, I literally had the business, the domain, used AI. I had a landing page up in under 5 minutes. Like, it was pretty impressive. But it's about just learning from me and my perspective of the different tools and the different tools that can kind of integrate with each other. And I would assume that it'd kind of be similar in the Web3 space, like how you've just shared this resource as Wizard Open Zeppelin. Like, if you start to know, and that's where I think the soft skills, the consultants or the blockchain strategists, and they're like, okay, well, you can use this, this, and this, and this application. You don't actually have to do any of the coding. It's kind of like with Wix, I can be like, okay, well, I'm just going to integrate Klaviyo, which is with my CRM, and it's just going to trigger this flow. Like, I haven't learned one coding thing, right? And some people think that I've like amazing and I've developed this massive skill, and I'm like, no, I just know what platforms to use and what kind of integrates. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, building off of that too, the Open Zeppelin wizard thing is really great too, because you can also deploy it through there. So there's a button somewhere on that page that says open in remix. And remix is just basically another front end thing that you can just like connect a button, connect to MetaMask through the Chrome extension, and then click deploy and it goes. And then it's on the blockchain forever.
But are you paying them for that service? Because obviously they've done all of the code, or like, how do they make their money? Like, surely.
I'm not sure how they make their money, honestly. So I think one of the tenets of blockchain is a lot of things are open source. And so we're very lucky that we don't have to pay for all of these services. So I'm not sure how they make their money, because I just use them all the time for free. I don't pay anything for anything. I'm really, really cheap.
It's open source. We talk about the tenets of blockchain all the time in the course, and you know, decentralization and permissionless is one of them. But at the end of the day, everybody has to generally, like, obviously there's people like, hey, all things blockchain, you know, we're all run based on volunteers, and we all do it because we're just passionate. And so there might be some of that, but ultimately somebody has to pay for the website and the domain and the operational cost, you know? So anyways, I was just wondering, but, well, if there's no other questions, I see that you've answered Jeremy's questions. We've got 5 minutes before we actually come to the official end. So if anybody else has any other questions, now's your time. Otherwise, you can maybe reach out to Jo. That's actually a good question, Jo. If anybody wanted to reach out to you afterwards, where's the best place for them to get in contact with you?
You can go ahead and add me on LinkedIn. I'll drop that in the chat as well. Yeah, I'm very, very active on there. I post all the time, just random nonsense, nothing specifically blockchain, usually just something like, oh, this is a funny Google Meet filter. So yeah, go ahead and follow me, message me on there.
Perfect.
For the best place to reach me.
I've just put my LinkedIn there as well. Anybody, I'm also I'd say LinkedIn. It's funny. I think I had somebody a while back maybe message me on Facebook, and I obviously wasn't responding. And then they messaged me on LinkedIn, and I responded right away. And they're like, I knew that LinkedIn would be the platform for me to respond. So LinkedIn. I've also recently just started with Twitter, because I've noticed that Twitter and LinkedIn are almost like your Web3 resume. You know, I was filling out some applications and they wanted my LinkedIn and my Twitter, and I'm like, oh, I better get more active. So maybe that would be my piece of advice for anybody that is just starting coding. Go and get a GitHub. If you're just starting and you want to transition a career into the Web3 space, if you don't have a LinkedIn page, start now. I remember 3 years ago when I didn't have a LinkedIn page, it seemed like a massive mountain to climb. So starting now would be my best advice. Also getting on crypto Twitter, even though I'm not a massive fan of it, but those are where the people are. So,
Yeah,
and then also attend. So I just don't know who that. Sorry, did you have a question?
Yes, I do have a question. Hey, I'm currently doing JavaScript and learning all that background, and I had my own. I just give you my background a bit. I'm a business background. I used to run my own businesses, but I recently switching to coding because I think I like it, the platform and the things. And I'm working in renewable energy engineering companies, more like electrical engineering, where they develop products for the battery systems, like off-grid, on-grid systems. So just looking for some internships that I can start with in the blockchain industry to understand the, because I know the software, but it's just like hard to understand, like like if you get internship to get to understand, see what kind of projects they do, how actually they work. How can I get a role, maybe part-time or a casual or a volunteer thing in blockchain?
I think, like Danielle was saying, I think just go on LinkedIn
Mm-hmm.
and start applying for things. I would say Labrys, but unfortunately, I think that we do have an agreement with the universities here that we do internships exclusively through them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I've looked on LinkedIn before. I've had people reach out to me on LinkedIn, um, trying to get me to like be a part of their project and things like that. So yeah, just be active on LinkedIn. If you build anything at all, post it on LinkedIn so that way it looks like it starts to be a resume basically, and then you have a bunch of projects and you get more notice. That's honestly how I became, my friend calls me a linkfluencer now, because she's like, you
Yeah.
post so much.
Mm-hmm.
um, so yeah, I would just start posting on LinkedIn, look at their
I'm
job
basically a
board.
self-taught. I don't have it. I'm not. I didn't enroll in anything because I was working full time. So I'm doing part-time studying as well on the side by myself. So if I'm just new in that space, just you basically saying just put your code out, use GitHub, and be more active on the social media platforms. Yeah.
Yeah, well, because a lot of people get stuck because they start watching the YouTube videos and then they don't actually
Mhm.
code it. But then they
Yeah.
start coding it and then they don't start sharing it. So then nobody knows what they're doing. So that's
Yeah.
kind of the steps that you need to do is that you need to make the GitHub, do the code, and then post it and share it. Even if it doesn't work. A lot of my code doesn't work.
Okay. Yeah, that's another thing. You feel like you're not there. You're just starting. You just have to improve a lot and all that kind of things. You just feel. I think that inferior complex comes in because you're just new to this industry. It just so much is happening around you. Thank you, Joe. Thanks for your answer.
Where are you based?
I'm in Brisbane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my recommendation to you is start getting out to all of the meetups and networking with people, whether it just be all things blockchain, but even other types of tech meetups and stuff like that, because a lot of startups
Mm-hmm.
are looking in their bootstrapping. And, for example, last year I was with a startup. I say to a lot of my students, especially in the beginning, I traded my time for tokens and equity in the company.
Mm-hmm.
I have a saying, you either get paid in two different ways. You either get paid in experience or money.
Yeah.
I grew out of that, like after I gained a certain amount of experience, and I was like, okay, I don't really think that this startup's going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I still have equity in the company if they ever do become, it's still alive, but I think that they're basically just keeping their head above water. But I learned so much through that process, and that is purely from going to meetups.
I believe in that. I don't mind doing the silly jobs in the startups. Like just because if you start from the ground, you learn so much. The basic structure of anything. That's not how I got this engineering company job, because my business background. I'm moving into tech. It's completely different, but I just went in and started loving the software stuff and coding because they built
Yeah.
trading and peer-to-peer trading, which is very cool. Which is the coming. I think the coming. A decade we will be doing selling electricity through our phone through our people, and that's what we do. So yeah, thanks for your advice. I will see you
It's
on
funny
20.
that the startup that I was with was actually in the energy sector. I've
Mhm.
also meetups I think is very, very, very popular. All things blockchain, like for example, on Wednesday we're gonna over like have 120 people there. So just meeting people, the amount of students and the amount of people that have met people or collaborated and got jobs from the meetups, huge. I've also shared in there, off chain has a couple of links. I haven't spent any time, but one of them is like a jobs channel on Telegram. I
Mhm.
think it's the first one, so maybe you can jump on there and see if there might be some opportunities. If you're more of an online person, I also recommend to my students is to find projects that you like and get into their Discords. I know somebody that has gotten a job opportunity just because they were active in a Discord, you know, and then they got a job. So just kind of finding a community, whether it be online or in person. Obviously, I'm an in-person person and I organize events, and a lot of my community and a lot of the people that have got jobs is because they go and they just talk to people and say, and do like what Jo did, just be tenacious, just be like, I'm looking for opportunity. Do you know anybody? And they'll be like, oh, well, actually, you know what? I know this guy that they just started a startup. There's so many of them. There's also a program called Start Mates. Yeah, if you haven't heard of it, go and look at their mentorship programs. They're all about startups and mentorship programs, and they do tons of different events. So it doesn't necessarily have to be like crypto or blockchain events, but there's also like the Brisbane AI Hub. Do you know what I mean? Go anywhere where entrepreneurs and startups are going to be, because we're always bootstrapping, you know?
Cool. Yeah, I think I got my first blockchain job at like a Deloitte meetup, which is not blockchain. So
yeah, I'm just getting into the space right now, just to meet people in this industry, because before that it was just always a business. But now I think that's what I joined this group, because I saw Daniel's book about blockchain, because my partner is crazy about blockchain and he's studying from you as well. He's one of your students. But yeah, it's just very intriguing that how blockchain and the coding just intrigues me as well, to just learn more about this.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Thank you so much, Jo, for all of your wisdom and your inspiration. The last thing I'm going to say before we jump off, I'm just going to share my screen. If anybody isn't already, I'm sure a lot of you have come through here, but if you're watching the recording or you stumbled across us, make sure that you keep an eye on the events. Okay. So if you are coming on Wednesday, I'll see you there. If not, you can always tune in online. And then we've got the AI prompting engineering in 2 weeks. So make sure that you go ahead and join those. Thank you so much, Jo, for your time. I always love hearing your story, and learned a lot also about where to get started. Not that I'm going to become a blockchain developer, but I'll be able to pass that information on to some of my students that are interested. So thank you, Jo, and thank you to everyone for tuning in. And until next time.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.